Congress keeps us on our toes,
They
right?
do, yeah.
The big, beautiful bill, as it's called, was passed and signed into law. And part of your role here, so kind of explaining, is, you're like the player coach, if you will. You've been in this business for quite some time, and we talked about that story last time you were on, but you help lead all of our advisors, which we have quite a few of now, to understand how to quickly adapt and tweak the planning process, the plans that we've actually written for clients when things like this change. Legislative change happens all the time. We talk about your plan has to be flexible, if nothing else. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on right now with the team?
Yeah, of course, we anticipated quite a few different potential changes over the first half of the year. And most of the planning that we've done for our clients, are whether new or tenured, have included more than one plan, depending on whether the Tax Cuts and Job Act or the big, beautiful bill as we know it now was extended or was put in place. And so now it's time for us to implement the plan that we had set forth with the intention of the Tax Cuts and Job Acts being extended. But it's not just income taxes, right, that the TCJA the extension of that allows us for planning, but also the different nuances of the bill that I know you spent hours in the last week learning.
Yeah, we've been digging, Evan and I, and Evan is our chief tax planning officer and CPA in-house, and he and I have both attacked it, if you will, from different angles. So, there's, and we always often talk about politically, there's campaign promises, and then there's what's reality, right? So this promise that we're not going to tax Social Security, so that is not actually in this bill, right? So, but there is a special senior deduction that radically changes some of the planning we're doing for clients that are 65 and older and are actively doing Roth conversions. We have to recompute the math because right now they're getting basically an extra $6,000 a year, but it's only for 25, 26, 27, and 28 tax years, right? So if we were doing larger Roth conversions for that client, their effective tax rate, once we phase them out over $250,000 in income, actually would go up significantly. So we have to actually recalculate some of those numbers. But again, this is what real planning really is all about, right? And why I've got to have somebody like you in-house when I give the information to go take it down to the troops, so to speak, right?
When we spent time earlier this week, right, going over the high-level aspects of the bill, specifically what you just talked about with the $6,000 increase to the seniors, not directly reducing their Social Security, the impact of their Social Security taxes, but nonetheless spent some time this week. But next week, as you mentioned, Evan's going to spend quite a bit of time with us and our team to ensure that we know all those nuances that we talked about.
Well, and I would tell you, this will help those that were less fortunate in saving for their retirement. Now, a lot of our clients have amassed some pretty good dollar amounts, so we have to do the unique planning we're talking about. But the great news is just for the general public, right? Over 2/3 of all retirees, their number one income source is, in fact, Social Security. And this will actually take 91% of Social Security recipients this year, according to the Tax Foundation, could potentially not pay any tax on that number, right? It was about 83%. In other words, the reality is the bottom half of society that's retired, it's their only income. And that's a sad state of affairs. But the good news is that some of those folks were paying tax on some of that income, even though it was their only source or had very little other sources that created the taxation. So this is actually going to give some folks a little bit more take-home pay. And we're talking about the folks that need it the most because, everything costs 25 to 30% more than it did just 5 years ago. Social Security has not kept up with that inflation number. So it's really beneficial to the bottom two quartiles of income recipients in retirement in America significantly. Now, what I want to pivot to is something I know you do as well. We do as my wife and I and Melissa do, and we do as a company, is charitable giving.
That's right.
There is massive opportunity to do charitable giving this way better than what will be next year because you're going to lose some of the deductibility of charitable gifts, unfortunately, starting next year. I don't like that provision in the bill, but it is what it is. So one of the strategies I talk about on the air sometimes is called a donor advised fund. I'm going to probably have 10 of the advisors create their first donor advised fund for themselves this year based on what this tax law says. So I just think it's fun to start doing this planning level and sharing down to the troops, if you will, what they can do and what's possible, because there's some amazing opportunities if you're proactive in your planning.
Well, it's so important. You mentioned, right, we have to practice what we preach and to implement it for ourselves allows us to know all the details to do the same for our clients. So that's one of many aspects of tax planning that we work on each and every day, each and every week, and become as familiar with it as possible so that we can in fact implement those same plans for our clients.
Well, let's pivot real quick too, because here in Nebraska, one of the things that we are considered a red state, even though District 1, we're going to talk about that later, I think, with Chip, or District 2, excuse me, is a purple district, if you will. Omaha is a high property tax state.
That's right.
So, yeah, we're like in the top 10 of worst states, right, when it comes to property taxes.
Yeah, top 5. We're number 45 out of 50 in property taxes right now.
So, and that's not a good thing. You don't want to be there. So the SALT deduction, so this is state and local tax. You have to itemize your return. Just so you know, less than 10% of tax filers every year itemize their returns, when it was about 30% prior to the previous big tax bill, the Tax and Job Act of 2017, otherwise referred to as the Trump tax cuts. So I will net benefit from this SALT deduction because you're going from $10,000 up to $40,000. So if you have property taxes over $10,000 like I do, I complain about it all the time, I get to actually write that off now instead of just the cap plus charitable giving, et cetera. So you can, your state and local income tax, there's not a lot of filers it hits, but this unfortunately benefits people in bluer states, if you will, that don't fiscally run sound budgets, and they're just passing that tax burden on to you and I all across the U.S. But if you understand how to do this, you can take advantage of it.
Yeah, of course you have to itemize to get that $40,000, and that will continue to go up incrementally until it phases out in 2030.
Well, sneaky. This is part of how they actually had to actuarial pay for this bill. So I think Evan and I are going to do a whole webinar on this bill probably in the next week or two that we'll post right here on this YouTube channel, pending compliance review. But anyway, where, the reason they put the senior deduction in there is so that they wouldn't actually itemize, because less people are actually going to use that SALT deduction. And then there's a phase out on it as well. Once your income goes over $500,000 on that SALT deduction, your effective tax rate really jumps. So there are a lot of, we'll call them white collar professionals or entrepreneurs that are making, let's just say they're making $600,000 a year. I can tell you one right now, a doctor that I know that is making right around $620,000 a year. Well, he could actually cut one day out of his schedule, take his income down to about $580,000, and drastically, under this provision, reduce his effective tax bill. So do you want the extra day off, or do you want to pay 55% tax on that last $100,000 you earned? And that's the decision the client will have to make. But again, this is where you have to dig into this bill and understand how to explain to folks where they want to do. So if you can control your income, which is something I do very well, and focus on exactly what my taxable income will be every year, I can take it up or I can take it down. And we show clients and retirees every day, even what we call bread and butter retirees, how to do just that with our own proprietary software. And you get to lead the coaching on all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a rewarding experience. That another aspect I don't want to overlook, with about a minute left in this segment, is the business owner clients that we have. There's some aspects of this bill for business owners, specifically writing off some of their assets, mechanical, things like that.
Well, and bonus depreciation is back, and a lot of business owners need to pay attention to that. On top of that, if you are going to, R&D credits are back. If you're going to build any kind of building or put in service anytime in the next 4 years a building, there are massive tax credits available for you if you didn't know that. So lots to unpack, and we're going to have our next business owner tax class, our SEPA class, with Evan, Colin, our estate planning attorney, Mike Schudel, our other SEPA, myself. I believe that's coming up August 22nd. But anyway, so if you're an entrepreneur, you do not want to miss that class. It'll be about 8 o'clock in the morning, so you can get here, get in and get out in an hour and get some information that you can use. But anyway, lots to unpack. This segment flew by, man. Thanks for stopping in the studio. We got to keep rolling, bud.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Yeah. Hey, if you're looking for more content like this, make sure you check out these videos, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll be notified when we publish more content that will help you retire smart. Thanks for watching.